And how are the levels? Is the game way louder than me? Am I way louder than the game? It shouldn't be. Yeah. 100% my fault on that. Okay, so my levels are now bouncing. Phidias Leaf says I can hear you now. Okay, great. Great. So we're good to go. So, yeah, I'm using my Mister just because it's an easy-to-use thing. That's about it. We're gonna up the number of lives, the number of punch kick. That all makes sense. There's a sound test, so scientifically we know that this game has, you know, some level of advantage over other games, maybe. So yeah, it was tempting to just go right to Streets of Rage, right? But you know, then I would just play Streets of Rage for the whole thing. So, yeah, Phidias Leaf asks, how's the move going? It's going. We're still in the kind of figuring things out stage, so I don't want to talk too much about it, but I think it's going to work out. So this was an unlicensed port of Double Dragon from Accolade, who actually had a bit of a lawsuit with Sega around not just this game, but, you know, games they did. Snarkcast Production says never played this version. Yeah, again, since it was unlicensed, I think a lot of places didn't like carry it, but I believe my local video store had it. It's not a very good port, honestly. Phidias Leaf says that while I can hear you, the game music is driving you on. Okay, I'll turn that down then. Hopefully that's better. I'll turn the TV down a little bit too, although that shouldn't... I'm closer to the mic than the TV, so that shouldn't make too much of a difference. But yeah, I think this being an unlicensed port, it didn't get a ton of distribution, or as much distribution as probably any of the parties concerned would have liked it to. So, and it's not a great port. It's fine. It's definitely better than the Genesis version of Double Dragon 2, but that is the very definition of damning with faint praise. Snarkcast Production says that works. Phidias Leaf says much better. Okay, great. I'm glad that's better. Every game is different, every system is different, so it's like, it's really hard to sort of figure out the best configuration and have it be universal. I was cutting it so close I didn't do a test, which I should have done. Usually I record about 30 seconds and talk and then listen back to the recording, but didn't do that this time. Should have. Phidias Leaf says, has Ballistic ever done anything else? Ballistic was a they were a subsidiary of Accolade, or just a label, I guess, maybe even, of Accolade. So Accolade is like, if you've heard of Accolade, that's who did this port. Well, they didn't, sorry, that's who published this port. The port was actually done by, I want to say this was a Western developed port. I know that, and I'm trying to remember who it actually was that did it. I want to say it was Sculptured Software, maybe, but I might be misremembering. Snarkcast Production says, I know they released Star Control in the Genesis, which was the system's first 12 meg cart, and they also did Super Off-Road. Yeah, that sounds right. Oh, ooh. Do the elbow. Come on. There you go. Oh, but he falls forward, of course. And I just walked off the edge. That was... Wow. So yeah, this was an unlicensed port. It wasn't licensed by Sega. I believe it was licensed by Technos, or Trade West, who I guess had the publishing rights in the West. But not by Sega, which is weird. But I guess there were games like that on the NES too, right? Tengen did a bunch of ports that were licensed by Sega, for example. You know, but not licensed by Nintendo, so stuff happens. Snarkcast Productions says they I think I don't remember if I read this or not. They did the Super Off-Road port for Genesis. Did that one have support more than 2 players though? I don't remember. Off you go. So yeah, I kind of wanted to show off Vertex Neo Geo Core for the Mister is it's not done, but it's working. Smoke Monster showed it off, I think, last weekend, and I kind of thought about showing that off, but I ended up having to run some errands after work, and didn't actually get have time to try to get it up and running, so and I didn't want this to be like a tech support stream. So also let's see, Perfidious well, so Starcast says doubtful that Super Off-Road on the Genesis had multiplayer support. It came out before the adapter. Perfidious Leaf says, anybody know of any other single screen racing games? Yes, Super Sprint is a single screen racer. That was an arcade game, and then there was a NES port, I believe, as well. Notably, if you're a fan of Pat the NES Punk, Danny Sullivan's Indie Heat, which is like a running gag on the CU podcast, that is a single screen racing game, 4-player for the NES. What's interesting about the NES version of Super Off-Road is that it's 4 players, but the arcade is only 3, so it's actually in some ways it's better than the arcade version. Snarkcast guy, he's probably the delay probably hasn't kicked in, but he also mentioned Danny Sullivan's Indie Heat. Gotta love Danny. Love that Danny. Also, probably everybody watching this knows, but just a reminder, our Extra Life Marathon is happening this weekend. Saturday into Sunday. So, if you want 24 hours of this, it won't be 24 hours of Genesis beat 'em ups, but if you want 24 hours of me and Eric, and fewer hours, but still like a lot of hours of like Kurt and Mike and Coffee and Anthony and Alex, and I don't know, Alexis maybe will show up. Who knows? We'll see who comes around. But if you want, 24 hours of us hanging out, raising money for kids, and if you want to get a discount on a request on Patreon, they're a lot more expensive than they are on Extra Life Day. Perfidious Leaf says it's happening. I think what you mean is Ron Paul, it's happening.gif. Snarkcast said he might load up Danny Sullivan on his NES Classic. Perfidious Leaf says, how long will this particular stream be on? That depends on how long people are hanging out and, like, participating. But, I was planning to go for an hour to an hour and a half tonight, so. Alright. That's enough of that. Oh, uh-oh. I didn't program a button to go back to the home menu, so I have to actually cut the power to the mister and plug it back in. So sorry about that. That's awkward. Because I didn't drag out my keyboard. That's usually a keyboard command, and I didn't. Schlep my keyboard over here. Uh-oh. And maybe I should have, because now I can't even bring up the menu to choose a game. That's weird. Why was it working? Perfidious Leaf says, I asked because I have some chores to take care of. I'll be back with questions. Okay, I'm here to answer your questions. It's part of what tonight's about. But yeah, hour to an hour and a half, depending on, you know, if an hour comes along and, you know, nobody's watching, then... Okay, clearly trying to do this without the keyboard was a mistake. I should not have done that. That's weird. Okay. Oh, because once it boots into the core, then it changes the layout and it won't let me. Okay. Okay. I have to grab a keyboard. I'll be right back. Let's see here. Perfidious Leaf says, whoa. Perfidious Leaf says, how are you too dumb to take a keyboard out of a bag? A box. No, he didn't say that. Perfidious Leaf says, I have some downtime, so I might get started right now. If Joey Pink has to pick an entrance theme, one tune from a video game, and the other a song from any artist of his choosing, what will they be? Well, Joey Pink had an entrance theme. He had a couple, actually. Whoa, no. That's not what we're doing at all. So the song from any artist is easy, because I had one. It was True Faith by New Order. What's going on. And if I mean an entrance theme from a video game, that I don't know. I'd have to think about that for a second. Smoke Monster says, woohoo, Patreon stream. What up, Smoke? Yeah, I don't know. A video game song. Probably something from Streets of Rage. I do not know why. There we go. Okay, that was weird. Anyways. What are we doing here? So we did Double Dragon. I'm trying not to, because I know if I start playing Streets of Rage, I'm just going to keep playing Streets of Rage. So I'm kind of trying to like hold off on that. Why not? Let's do Golden Axe. Seems quintessential. Yeah, but the whoa, Mr. doesn't love the Golden Axe. Maybe it's hopefully that it's just a title screen problem. Alright, looks good. I've always been a Tyrus Flare guy. I don't know about you. Just the being able to summon the dragon. My good friend Alex was killed. I don't care about that. Being able to bring the dragon down on dudes is why I was always a big fan of Tyrus. I like that all of the other sound stops when an enemy dies in this port. This game is not that good, by the way. There's a lot of people who have a lot of nostalgia for it, and I get that, but Golden Axe is actually not a very good game. Golden Axe, The Revenge of Death Adder is actually a much better game. But, of course, it was released in the arcades and then never anywhere else. So, good luck playing that one. So yeah, this is the Genesis beat 'em up stream. If you're just showing up because of the latest episode of Same Name Different Game, which by the way is doing like ridiculous numbers. Like I don't know what happened. I don't know if someone like well known shared it or if it just if the algorithm just decided that Double Dragon 2 was something that people needed to know about. But as of this morning when I looked, the Double Dragon 2 episode of Same Name Different Game, the new Double Dragon 2 episode of Same Name Different Game, not the original one, was within 1,000 views of being the most viewed video on the channel. So, yeah. I don't know, again, I don't know what's going on there. I don't know if someone much more well-known than me shared it. I don't know if the algorithm just decided it was my turn. I don't know. But I'm fine with it, whatever the case. Snarkcast Production says, I remember Golden Axe 3 was reviewed for the Genesis and it said, under the bad, when an amazing arcade version comes out and the Genesis sequel completely pales in comparison. Yep. I don't think I'm going to play a lot of... I think you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to play this until we get to see the dragon. And once I bust out the dragon, then we're going to switch it up. I think we're going to switch to Ninja Turtles, I think, is what we'll do. Now that I have a keyboard hooked up and can easily switch games, which, again, I should have just grabbed the keyboard in the first place, because when you're using the Mister, it's really good to have a keyboard hooked up. Snarkcast Production says, and I was able to bait that guy right off the edge. Golden Axe 3 was horrible. Yeah, Golden Axe 3 is not. It's not great. Golden Axe 2 isn't great either. I feel like Golden Axe 3 was one that didn't even come out in the US at the time, if I'm not mistaken. Like, we didn't actually get that one until, like, the Sonic Ultimate Genesis collection on PS3 and 360. Excuse me, 360 or something like that. I don't remember, though. So I was going to play Resident Evil 2 tonight, and I realized that not everybody may have played... It's such a new game, and a lot of people maybe haven't played it, so I didn't want to accidentally spoil something for people who didn't want it spoiled. So in the future, I think I'm going to ask people what they, for suggestions. Come on. Snarkcast says, true, I had to import it, which I didn't. Good move. Not importing that. Alright, so now I can, when we get to the boss, which I think is right here. Yeah, I think these two ladies are the, dragon. Yeah. No, that wasn't the boss. That's fine. It was the boss to me. We could play Green Dog. Or as Joe from GameSack likes to say, green dog. But we're not going to play. It's not a beat 'em up. That's what we're doing tonight. We're doing beat 'em ups tonight. It's beat 'em up night on the Stick Patreon. Tournament Fighters. Hyperstone Heist. Boom. That's what we're doing. Perfidious Leaf says, weird that the third game never got a release in the West and Death Adder's Revenge never got any sort of home release. Snarkast Production says, I didn't really get into the import scene until the Saturn. So to Perfidious Leaf, yeah, the Duel got a release on the Saturn, but not, which was the fighting game that apparently nobody really liked. But the beat 'em up that people did like didn't get a release. Who knows? Hopefully, I did press start. I have to remap my buttons. What's going on here? Button mode, no. I just right, left, down, up, A, B, C. Start. Mode. X, Y, Z. Now this button is just finicky. I think. And yeah, the import scene, I didn't get into the import scene until attack, jump, dash, attack. Yeah, that's better. I didn't get into the import scene. Well, how do I put this? I was aware of the import scene earlier than that. But I personally didn't start importing games. It was late, much later for me that I actually started importing games. I had friends who had imported games. I don't even remember the first game I imported, honestly, at this point. It was a while. It wasn't until like the mid-2000s probably that I actively started importing games. But I was aware of the import scene, and I had friends who played imports, and I played imports at their houses and stuff prior to that. Perfidious Leaf says, since I have to leave not too far from now, I might just ask you a few more questions. Hey man, that's what it's for. That's why there's only a couple people in the chat. What's some of your favorite levels from games? You know, I will say, is it 5-3 in Super Mario Bros. 3 where you get the Karibo shoe? That's always been one of my favorite levels, just because you get the Karibo shoe. And like, even now when I play Super Mario 3, I'll never warp past World 5, because I always want to be able to play in the shoe. Let's see here. The Water Temple and Ocarina of Time. No, just kidding. Speaking of Resident Evil 2, the police, like, it's not a that game isn't broken into levels, so it's you don't really say that, I guess, but the police station setting before you go into the underground lab and everything. That whole setting is super cool. I actually really like the first stage of Super Double Dragon, since I'm playing beat 'em ups. The Las Vegas Strip and all the neon in the background, I think that's really cool looking. And fighting on top of the truck in Super Double Dragon is also really dope. A lot of people hate elevator levels, but actually, in Streets of Rage 2? Streets of Rage... I think it's Streets of Rage 2, where you ride on the elevator on the pitcher's mound, and then at the bottom you fight the wrestler guy. I think that's Streets of Rage 2, because you fight him on the beach in Streets of Rage 1, so I'm pretty sure that's Streets of Rage 2. That's great. Flashman's level in Mega Man is like the only time that I don't hate ice physics, maybe. The Clock Tower in Castlevania 3. There's a lot of sort of classic levels. The Waterfall in Contra, just because at that time I hadn't really seen very many sort of vertically oriented stages. Yeah, I don't know. That's about all I can think of off the top of my head right now. I like a lot of this in some fighting games. Like I hate all the stages in Marvel vs. Capcom 2 because they have nothing to do with like anything. But I love the stage designs in the other Marvel vs. Capcom games for the most part, because they're all like, they kind of call back to specific moments in Marvel comics or specific, you know, Capcom stuff. There's a really, in the first Marvel vs. Capcom, the Mega Man stage with Dr. Wily like running around in the background is really great. That kind of stuff. I like those. Those are just, that's just aesthetics though, right? So, oh boy, we got a bunch of stuff going on in the chat. All right, let's see here. Snarkcast Productions says, when it came to Saturn, you had no choice. The first one I did was X-Men vs. Street Fighter. Yeah, that's absolutely true, man. You're... I didn't own a Saturn at the time. I didn't own a Saturn. The Saturn I own now is the only Saturn I've ever owned. And I got it... Let's see. I'm going to say 2006, give or take. Summer of... Would have been 2006. No, summer 2007. Summer 2007 I got my Saturn. And it has been a lovely 12-year relationship. And I'm going to upgrade it with a Satiator as soon as Professor Abrasive has them ready. I contribute to his Patreon, so I'll get first go at the first batch, which I'm really excited about. That's a device that I really... Just because Saturn collecting is such a ridiculous market for US games, that I've been really looking forward to that, to make it sort of easy and accessible to play the US version of Mega Man 8 and Bomberman and games that I have import copies of. Saturn Bomberman, you know, I have that on in the import version because it was, you know, $30 instead of like $200. But I would like to be able to read all the text, and my Japanese is not what it used to be. Let's just put it that way. So, and even when my Japanese was good, I was pretty good at speaking it, not very good at reading it, because learning to read Japanese fluently takes a really long time. But I did take 6 semesters of Japanese in college, so I could speak it. You know, I was conversationally fluent at one point. I would say I could talk to someone and like have a normal relatively normal conversation. But I was never that good at reading, and then when you stop speaking it, especially a language that's so different from English, like, forget it. But yeah, man, X-Men vs. Street Fighter and all those fighting games that I can't believe didn't get US releases on the Saturn, like, ugh, so good. Radiant Silvergun, all that stuff. Perfidious Leaf is going to rapid fire. Any arcade games you wish you could have played in their original cabinets? Honestly, I've been to so many like really nice big arcades that I don't think there's anything that I haven't played in an original cabinet. Magfest always has a giant, and Snarkcast can vouch for that. Magfest just has just a really fantastic arcade with a ton of games, candy cabs and stuff, and I've been to the Galloping Ghost, if you've watched my video, the 10 Reasons to Visit an Arcade. Eric Grider from Game vs. Game and I did that at the Galloping Ghost in suburban Chicago, Illinois, where I've been a number of times. My bachelor party was there. My friend Greg had a birthday party there twice. So I can't think of any arcade games that like I want to play in original cabinet form that I have not played. Snarcast Production says Bernie Stolar single-handedly killed off the Saturn in '98. Finding good U.S. games was very difficult. Greats were imported. Thunder Force 5, Radiant Silvergun, Silhouette Mirage, for starters. Silhouette Mirage, yeah, there's a U.S. version of that, but it's was it Working Designs? Like, they didn't do a great job with it. They made it a lot harder than the original release. Thunder Force 5, yeah, absolutely. Well, there was a U.S. PlayStation release of that as well. If I'm walking, like, is Raphael Jesus Christ? Like, I'm walking on the water, but the pizza monsters are coming up from under it. In the Turtles in Time version of this stage, you're on a surfboard. So I don't know what's going on there. Anyway, Snarkast was saying that Bernie Stolar really killed off the Saturn. He did. There's an infamous interview where he said Saturn is not our future, and that was like 2 years before 2 years before the Dreamcast, I want to say, just about. And yeah, it was to the point where U.S. stores, I do remember that. I didn't have a Saturn, but I had a friend who did, and again, imported a lot of games for it. And there were U.S. stores that were importing Saturn games from Japan just to have stuff to sell. But in retrospect, the Saturn is now one of my favorite. I mean, I liked it at the time. It was hard to justify over a PlayStation. Especially because I was a teenager, right? It wasn't like I just had a ton of money. I was 13 when the Saturn launched. No, I was 12. I was 12 during the Saturn surprise launch. I turned 13 in 1995. So, Leatherhead is such a jerk. Yeah, there was no way for me to justify having 3 systems because I had a PlayStation and I had an N64, and it would be a hard sell on my folks to be like, give me another system. But the Saturn rules. I love the Saturn so much. In retrospect, it might now be my favorite system of that generation. I don't know. That's tough because the PS1 had so many great games that not only that I loved, but that spawned franchises that I love, right? Like, Resident Evil and Resident Evil 2 and Metal Gear Solid and Resident Evil 1 was on the Saturn, but it's not a great port, if we're being honest. Perfidious Leaf says, every time I see that big crocodile in his name, I can't but imagine him ripping to people to shreds with a chainsaw. Now, that's Leatherface, not Leatherhead. Is it... Okay, I apologize. I have a kitchen thing I need to go. My wife is working on dinner and she needs my assistance. I will be right back. Alright, sorry about that. We got an Instant Pot for Christmas, and we're still sort of navigating the ropes, so she wanted me to just come and look at something really quick. So sorry about that. Let's see here. Perfidious Leaf. I forgot that the continue screen on this is the movie poster. Graffiti Steve says third it on the Saturn Love, and says, do you have any videos you've put on hiatus or canceled? I don't... yes, actually. Sorry, yes. There is one sort of... I didn't get very far. So I don't know if I'd go quite as far as to say it was canceled. But if you watch... What is it? There's an episode of Obscure Old Games from when I was still hosting. I think it's a Halloween. I don't remember which one it is, though. Where at the end I tease a Metal Gear 2 episode. Not Metal Gear Solid 2. Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake. Which was supposed to be sort of the companion piece to the Metal Gear same name, different game. And I have a full, somewhere I have a full, on like DV tape, I have a full playthrough of Metal Gear 2 that I recorded. Start to finish. But, yeah, that one never happened. And it didn't get very far. I did like an outline. I never actually, there was never a full script. Nothing of, no host segments were shot or anything. And that was just because that was the, so 2013 was not a great year for me in terms of my YouTube output. It was a great year for me personally. But if you ever go back and look at the videos, you know, sort of in their chronological order, you would notice that there are only 2 videos in 2013. There is there's a WrestleMania video and a Halloween video, which tells you exactly where my priorities lie. But around that time, I was just really, I worked so much overtime. If you were listening to the podcasts we were doing at the time, like, I talked about being overworked just all the time. You know, and that kind of stuff. We would talk. I would be like, oh, I'm sorry I'm late to the podcast. I was stuck at work until 10 o'clock, and I was working, you know, generally at least 60 hours a week, sometimes as much as 80. And it just wasn't... It was not a conducive environment to making videos because I got married in 2013. We paid for, you know, a very large portion of our own wedding, and all that stuff. And then that was when my wife got into law school, and so that's when we moved to DC, and just like all that stuff, there was just no time for making videos. And so I did this full playthrough of Metal Gear 2, and it was supposed to come out in like either late 2012 or early 2013, and I just... It got to the point where it was getting so close to WrestleMania that I just junked it and did the WrestleMania Saturday Night Slam Masters episode instead. Still intending to eventually go back to Solid Snake, and you know, by the time I started in earnest again in early 2014, when I started with the Gradius episode, which is sort of in my brain, that's sort of cycle 2 of the show, and then sort of based on the changes that I just made in the most recent episode, the Double Dragon 2 episode is sort of, in my brain, is cycle 3 of the show, which is interesting because I'm actually about to move again, so they're sort of divided into chunks, I guess, in that way. But yeah, so yeah, there's a Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake episode that was like kind of in my brain, and there's a game footage for it, and it never happened. And I still would like to do it again, but I have to record a new session because like that footage is not very good in terms of the quality. That was when I was still recording from composite video into a DV cam and recording that way. So, or actually, no, I had my Dazzle by then. I was using a Dazzle, which was still composite video, so like the footage is junk. So, you know, at this point, I would play the game over, and I mean, also that was 7 years ago, so I don't know how much of the game I really remember. I'd have to play it again to just have a better sense of what to talk about. Let's see here. Starcast Predictions says, didn't the Super NES version do the movie poster as well? And then Snarkast, yeah, it's a hacked Super NES classic that Snarkast is using. It does have the same continuous stream as the movie poster. I think the reason that I didn't know that off the top of my head is because I don't remember the last time I played that game single player, and if you're playing 2 players, you never see the continue screen. I think that's why I didn't know that. Because, yeah, I really, like, I legitimately cannot remember the last time I played Turtles in Time solo. Because I only bust that one out when there's folks to play it with. So, yeah. Okay, good to know. Cool. Anyway, so yeah, that was my rant about the lost episode. But that's the only one that I can remember off the top of my head. There were definitely ones that I had ideas for, but, like, I would say that if it never got past an idea phase of, like, I would like to do a video about this. Oops, I never did. Like, that's not really it. I didn't abandon it or you know, shit can it or whatever. It just never happened. So. Providius Leaf says, thanks for the answers. Looking forward to the next one. Have yourselves a good night. Good night, Joel. I'm just going to use your real name. Good night, Joel. I hope you come back and catch the rest of the stream later when you have a chance. I was planning on going for a little while longer. Just gonna blow that up, I guess, because there's nobody else around to use it on. And I mentioned this in the post, but if people are watching this after the fact or whatever, I do plan to move these around. So this month it was on a Thursday, and next month I'm going to do it on a weekend day. And we're going to kind of rotate, because I know some people, weekends are good, some people they're not good, weekdays are good. You know, I might do a super late night one if people want that at some point, just to, you know, get the... Todd says you can use my real name too. That's Snarkcast. Okay, great. Thanks, Todd. Now the real question is, can I call Smoke Monster Mike, or does he blanch at that? Would he prefer to not be known as Mike? If he's still even watching, I don't know. Alright, the next time that I lose all my lives, we're doing Streets of Rage. Because now I've been going for the better part of an hour. And now I don't feel that bad if I just spend the rest of the time playing Streets of Rage. Because Streets of Rage rules! This game kind of gets a bad rap, though, you know, if we're being honest. This game is sort of seen as an inferior port of Turtles in Time, and in some ways it is. But it's still like it's a perfectly cromulent beat-em-up unto itself. Konami's early games, their first couple of games on the Genesis, were like not spectacular. I'm sure that if you're watching this, you've probably seen the Sunset Riders episode of Same Name, Different Game. But that version of Sunset Riders is not great. I mean, there are worse ports in the world. And in fact, there are worse ports from Konami. But Sunset Riders it's not. It wasn't the A-Team at Konami working on Sunset Riders. Ooh, shell shock. I might argue that, but for the four-player support, lack of four-player support, this game might be better than the arcade Turtles in Time. I might argue that. I don't know. It's hard to say. Because you actually get to fight Bebop and Rocksteady, which you don't get to fight them in the arcade, Turtles in Time. Instead, you fight Toka and Ryzar. But the Super Nintendo version, of course, sort of has trumps there, because you get to fight both Toka and Ryzar and Bebop and Rocksteady. Which one was Seamus? Was Seamus Bebop or Rocksteady? With the Mohawk, you'd think he would be Bebop, but I actually think that's wrong. I think that was the thing. Everybody was like, oh, obviously he'd be Bebop because he's got the big Mohawk, but he was actually Rocksteady or something, I think? I don't remember. Those movies looked really bad, so I never saw either of them. Snarkass says Seamus was Rocksteady. See, that's the thing. That doesn't make sense. Why would you get a dude with a big mohawk to not be the one with the big mohawk? Doesn't make any sense. Also, I appreciate that you spelled his name like the actual correct way, but the incorrect way for WWE, because they spell it with an H. Which my wife is part Irish, and that really bothers her. And I was like, well, wrestling fans, I guess. And she's like, do these wrestling fans not know anybody named Sean? Which, of course, is the obvious, like, right? If you know anyone named Sean, you should understand how Seamus is pronounced. Okay. What did I say I was going to play? Oh, right. Streets of Rage. I could play Splatterhouse 3. But I'm not going to. I'm going to play Streets of Rage 2. Streets of Rage 2. Because it's the best one. Let's see. Todd says, much to my shock and with my hatred of Michael Bay, the TMNT film with Seamus was, dare I say, good. I don't believe you. I think you're trying to trick me. And he says, to be fair, Bebop was always African-American. That's true. Bebop was a black guy, and it would be weird for Seamus to be... But then you could just make Rocksteady a black guy instead. Like, you could still have the equal amount of representation. Just make the guy who turns into a rhino a black guy instead of the warthog. Like, that shouldn't make a difference, you know what I mean? Make them both black guys. I don't know, except then you wouldn't have Seamus, but, whatever. Anyways. Todd says, I never thought about that. My ex was the same way about Ra's al Ghul and the proper pronunciation, which is Ra's al Ghul. Yeah, it's Raish. It's definitely Raish. I'm just jamming to this song, because the soundtrack. I'm turning it up a little bit. Hopefully it doesn't come over into the mic and drown me out. If it does, let me know, but the soundtrack is too good to be ignored. Do normal. Those aren't voices. Those are punching noises. Those are voices. Grand Upper. Todd says, It's actually not. It really stunned me that it was enjoyable, but then again, Brad Garrett as Krang was almost identical to the animated version originally by Pat Fraley. I did not realize that Brad Garrett was the voice of Krang in that movie. Well, you know something, brother, I always gotta go with Max. I was gonna start with Max. Sometimes I'll switch to Axel or whatever, but... I never really, like, I feel like that's supposed to be, like, working a headlock, kinda, like, but I've never really been sure if is he punching them, or if he's putting them in, like, a headlock or a front chancery. I've honestly never been entirely sure what that animation is supposed to be. You know what that one is, though? It's a good old choke slam. Knee to the face, of course. Kind of a bummer that he doesn't do a pile driver or a power bomb like Mike Hagar, though. Look at how much health that drains from these mooks, though. Right? Like... I do love that the big guy in this game can swing a knife or stab with a knife instead of throwing it automatically. Like, Hagar always throws the knife. Of course, you can opt to throw the knife, as you saw there. Look at that overhead belly to belly with that perfect bridge. Not just a perfect bridge, but he lifts himself back into a standing position, immediately following it. What an athlete. He looks like a natural athlete, too, doesn't he? No way Max is on the gas, right? I also... I love that... I love that Max goes out to fight crime in the streets in his gear. Like, if I ever decided to become a vigilante crime fighter, I'd put my trunks and my boots on to go to go out just to be like Max. You know, because wrestling boots are definitely made for just like walking around on damp city streets. That's not going to be a problem at all. I really appreciate that Jack's laughing sound is really, really, like, ridiculously similar to Mel Blanc's, like, Dr. Jekyll voice. Like, if you've ever seen the Looney Tune where Tweety hides from Sylvester in the Hyde potion, and then there's like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. That laugh sounds just like this boss. Todd says seeing this makes me want to load up Streets of Rage Remake again. Streets of Rage Remake was so good. That was like, I want to say that was my game of the year. The game of the year that came out. I'd have to look back at our old spreadsheets for the stickies. Stickies, by the way, are happening as part of the Extra Life Marathon on Saturday. So, get ready for that. Get hype, stay hype. It's like sort of a choke. His jumping throw, it's like sort of a choke bomb almost, more than like a choke slam, like a double-handed sort of choke bomb. Get him with that Polish hammer at the end there. End of his combo. Look at that dithering for those lights. Well, Todd says it got number 5 on my list that year. It was up there for me. I think it might have been my game of the year, but I don't remember what else came out that year. If that was the same year as like if that was the same year as Arkham Asylum and Uncharted 2, then it was not number 1, but it was up there. And Todd says, for the time being, I'm doing my own Super NES brawler session, currently playing Return of Double Dragon. That's a good one. That's a real good one. There is an argument to be made that is the best beat 'em up on the Super NES. I don't know that I'm necessarily making that argument, because Turtles in Time, as I sort of just alluded to, also super good. Let's see, why does he get throw precedence? And the answer is because he's a boss, but... yeah, take the Polish hammer. Todd says not sure, but I do recall Arkham being number 1 for me. I think that year, Uncharted 2 was my number 1, and Arkham was like right behind it. Uncharted 2 is so good. The first Arkham game is also so good. See, that's what a life of crime brings you. You get suplexed into an oil drum. That is just the most awkward. It looks like an elbow. I think it's supposed to be like a phenomenal forearm, you know? Like he's jumping and coming down like that, but there's not enough frames of animation to like really communicate that, so it looks like just the world's most awkward elbow drop. Can you imagine a guy that size hitting you with a length of pipe like that? Like, forget it, man. That's it. You done. You done, son. Like, bare minimum, we're into Broken Bones territory. If a dude that size just hauls off and whacks you with a length of pipe like that, that's your best case scenario, is, like, your collarbone is broken. I'm gonna say your worst case scenario is, like, you're dead. So it looks like there's a little bit of graphical artifacting from the Mister here, but, you know, again, if you've seen or heard me talk about the Mister at all, like, that's totally acceptable, I think, for what this thing can do. I think, like, a little bit of artifacting is like, you know what? That's fine. That's my opinion, at least. You know, nothing is perfect except original hardware. And even then, original hardware often isn't perfect either. It's just... it's flawed in the way that it was either designed to be or that, you know, that it originally was flawed. So, you know... but nothing, no solution is completely perfect, but... for the price and for what it does and for how accurate it generally is, you know, Mister is again, absolutely worth the money as far as I'm concerned. I've said that before, but... oh, come on, I grabbed him. It's such a picture-perfect suplex, really. It's, you know... it's like a Kurt Hennig-level bridge on those. I hate this boss, by the way. This is like... especially playing as Max. This dude is sort of like unreasonably annoying because you're just so slow as Max. Also, like, how does this guy not have a higher position in the syndicate, right? Like, you know, hey, you with the jetpack, you guard the bridge. You'd think that he would be Mr. X's bodyguard. You'd be wrong. He's not Mr. X's bodyguard. This is a great stage, just for the absurdity of the whole thing. You know, this is one of those funny things where I can never tell when people on the internet are being genuine or just being silly on purpose, but, like, this is one of those things where people are like, oh yeah, and then in Streets of Rage you're fighting aliens, and it's like, well, it's like a haunted house in an amusement park. Like, you're not actually... those aren't actual aliens. They're amusement park attractions that the Syndicate is using to attack you. And you know, again, sometimes it's hard to tell when people are being silly on purpose, sort of playing dumb for a joke, or if they're really like, why are there aliens in Streets of Rage 2? It's like, there aren't. I mean, should I get mad that there are bare-knuckle arcade games in here? And one, that doesn't make any sense because, you know, this game in Japan is known as Bare Knuckle 2, so Bare Knuckle 1 would be Streets of Rage. Which, you know, did they make an arcade game based on the hero's exploits in the first game in this universe and call it Bare Knuckle? But also, Bare Knuckle was never released in the arcade. Well, that's kind of true, and kind of not. There was a Sega, like a Sega equivalent to a PlayChoice 10, but it never had a dedicated cabinet. Pirates. So Westworld is a popular thing these days, and relatively popular. And the original film, Westworld, Michael Crichton wrote the script after going to Disney World and riding Pirates of the Caribbean and sort of thinking about, like, what if the pirates came to life and attacked the guests? That was sort of the... and I believe that was also part of the inspiration behind Jurassic Park. So, you know, Crichton got a long... there was a long tail on that trip to Disneyland he took with his family whenever that happened. The 70s, I guess. Also, the original movie Westworld, I feel like gets a bad rap. Like, I feel like when the show came out, people were like, oh, this, like, elevates this old movie that is stupid or whatever. But, actually, the original Westworld movie is really good. I like it quite a bit. Best movie ever made about video games before video games were really the thing that existed. The soundtrack is so good. Oof. I think that's the first life I lost. Sorry, I was premature on my discussion of aliens. I was talking about that before I went into the pirate ride at this amusement park. Now as soon as I'm done with this guy, then I'll be going into the alien ride. Todd says, for those who say the Genesis can't make good music, give them 1-2 punch of Yuzo Koshiro and Hitoshi Sakamoto. Yeah, I mean, pretty much. You know, the only thing I will say in defense of those folks is, like, there are some Genesis games with really terrible sound. I love it when they put junk in the foreground so I can't see what I'm doing at all. Particularly fighting a boss. This SNES had some bad music. A good example is your same name different game of Captain America. Can't remember who Real Time got to compose the music, but Sakamoto did the Genesis version. Yeah. I also don't remember who did that Super NES music, but it's real bad. The sound in that game, just in general, is real bad. It's a serious jerk move to just, like... Yeah, chop to the face. Yeah, okay, we're gonna, since I mentioned it earlier, we're gonna do the elevator, baseball elevator, and then I think that's gonna be it. But keep this link because we're going to do an extra life test later this evening, probably at about 10 is the plan. So if you want to check in on that, I'll give you folks the exclusive access to that. It's going to be really boring. We're literally just going to be testing everything to make sure it works. To make sure that we can, Mike and I are going to try some screen sharing and stuff like that. So Eric's going to make sure the guinea pig cam is fully functioning. Do baseball. I also love that you get to the gate and then you just like are allowed to walk onto the field. Like that's like any Major League Baseball park is just like, no, it's fine. Just go hang out on the field and beat guys up. I guess the implication is that the syndicate like runs the baseball stadium, so Todd says Syndicate running the baseball stadium must be the Yankees. Yeah, sounds about right. Yep, here we go. Pitcher's Mound elevator stage. I knew it was Streets of Rage 2. I don't know why I even doubted myself, and why I would even think that it was the first one. So we're going to finish this stage, and I'm going to wrap it up for this month. I do want to thank everyone for coming out, hanging out, asking questions, being in the chat. This will eventually go public, but it's going to be probably, well, definitely next month because it's the 31st, but like, it's going to be a couple weeks before normal people can watch the archive of this stream. If you have any questions that you didn't get to ask or want to know anything or whatever, absolutely, do not hesitate to leave a comment. All that good stuff. Man, I just got my face rocked. But he got his face rocked even harder. Dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. Alright, thanks everybody for tuning in. I'm glad you hung out. I think this was a success. I mean, we had 3 or 4 people watching, but that's kind of what I expected, honestly. And hopefully people will watch the archive. And next month, we'll try a different time, and we'll see what happens there. But thanks for supporting. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for chatting. And if you want to keep this link handy and come back in like a half hour, we'll be testing stuff for Extra Life, but it's going to be pretty boring, so do that if you want. Otherwise, we'll see you on Saturday, hopefully, for Extra Life. 24 hours, starting probably around noon, I'm guessing. Bye.